put it in, just copy it and paste it and put it in an email?
No, I sent so many to now. One of them should have reached me. Because I kept on, this is what the meeting was.
I'll try and figure it out or get it.
No, I kept on, they kept on sending them out and they needed someone else.
All right. Good afternoon and happy Friday. Today, my guest will be Edem Wosornu, Director of OCHA's Crisis Response Division, and Altaf Musani, Director of Emergency Health Interventions at the World Health Organization. They will join us shortly from Panama to brief on their recent mission to Cuba. I have an appointment to announce. The Secretary General announced today the appointment of Janine Hennis-Plasschaert of the Netherlands as his new Undersecretary General for Safety and Security. She will succeed Gilles Michaud of Canada, to whom the Secretary General expressed his utmost gratitude for his leadership and tireless service to the organization amidst the challenges posed by the increasing complexity of crises. Ms. Hennis-Plasschaert brings to the position more than 30 years of experience in diplomacy, mediation, and international security. She has served since 2024 as the United Nations Special Coordinator for Lebanon, working with national, regional, and international actors to advance stability in the face of compounding domestic and regional crises. She also served as Special Representative of the Secretary General for Iraq and head of the UN Assistance Mission for Iraq from 2018 to 2024. She was also Minister of Defense of the Netherlands. We'll share her bio. This morning, the Security Council members held an open session on Syria. Briefing via VTC, Deputy Special Envoy for Syria, Claudio Cordone, said that he hopes to soon reach an understanding with the government on broad areas for cooperation, building on proposals made in March and the valuable discussions held since then, as well as on the relocation of the Geneva-based staff to Damascus. Mr. Cordone said that he will return to Damascus next week to advance discussions on the transition and his office's role in supporting it. For his part, Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs Tom Fletcher warned that humanitarian needs in Syria remain significant. About two-thirds of the population, that's about 15.6 million people, most of them women and children, require help this year. He added that current funding levels mean we will reach only about half of them. Almost halfway through the year, the humanitarian appeal is still barely more than 16% funded, with some $480 million received towards the $2.9 billion needed. He underscored that predictable and flexible humanitarian financing is essential to reach more people and make full use of improved access that we now have to many areas in Syria. In a statement we issued last night, the Secretary General welcomed the deal reached between the parties to the conflict in Yemen to release more than 1,600 conflict-related detainees, the largest such release agreed upon since the start of the conflict in Yemen. This achievement is the result of weeks of direct negotiations in Amman, Jordan, under the auspices of the United Nations. The Secretary General calls on the parties to move swiftly towards implementing the deal in cooperation with the International Committee of the Red Cross, so that families can be reunited as soon as possible. He also calls on them to work towards further releases, in line with their obligations under the 2018 Stockholm Agreement to release all conflict-related detainees for all. He calls on the government of Yemen and the Houthis to build on the positive momentum generated by Thursday's deal and engage constructively with the special envoy in Yemen towards an inclusive political process for a just and lasting peace in Yemen. The Secretary General further urges the Houthis to immediately and unconditionally release all arbitrarily detained personnel from the United Nations, NGOs, civil society, and diplomatic missions. He reaffirms that the United Nations system is determined to work through all possible channels to secure their safe release. The full statement is online. Assistant Secretary General Khaled Kiari spoke this morning at the commemoration of the 78th anniversary of the Nakba, in which more than 750,000 Palestinians were uprooted from their homes. Mr. Kiari said that the situation in Gaza today is a catastrophe of grave proportions. Since the horrific terror attacks by Hamas on the 7th of October 2023, devastation from the subsequent war is staggering, he said, adding that more than 85% of Gaza's population has been displaced, many repeatedly so. He said that in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, the UN continues to document systematic displacement of Palestinians, home demolitions, settlement expansion, and the proliferation of outposts, adding that more than 40,000 Palestine refugees have been forcibly displaced from camps in the northern West Bank since early 2025. The Secretary General has been clear, Mr. Chiari said. All Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, have no legal validity, are in flagrant violation of international law and relevant UN resolutions. In Gaza, OCHA reports that on Wednesday, hundreds of families were forcibly displaced from areas in eastern Deir el-Bala to other parts of Gaza. Palestinian militia forces reportedly went to people's shelters and ordered them out. Newly displaced families say they also received phone calls from people who identified themselves as Israeli forces, instructing them to leave within a short span of time. Humanitarian partners supported families in identifying spaces to stay in and obtaining basic services. OCHA reminds us that most of Gaza's 2.1 million people are already displaced. Many are staying in overcrowded and underserviced sites, exposed to serious health and environmental risks. On the public health front, yesterday, the UN brought pesticides into Gaza to help address the growing risks related to insects and other hazards. So far, teams in Gaza have relied largely on small quantities of locally procured agents. A pest control campaign is now set to start next week, prioritizing areas where waste has accumulated within or near residential areas, as well as around food storage facilities and public markets. Humanitarian partners say that to provide a more complete response to risks linked to rodents and pests, the Israeli authorities must let in critical rubble removal and explosive ordnance clearance equipment and facilitate access to Gaza's 2 sanitary landfills near the Strip's perimeter. To give you a sense of how restrictive access still is, during the first 11 days of May, only half of the aid trucks from Egypt could offload at Israeli-controlled crossings along Gaza's perimeter. This doesn't include bilateral donations or commercial imports. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, yesterday, Israeli forces killed a 15-year-old boy in Nablus, reportedly for throwing stones. I have the following statement attributable to the spokesperson for the Secretary General on Ukraine. The Secretary General is alarmed that a United Nations vehicle was struck twice in Kherson City in Ukraine on the 14th of May. The clearly marked vehicle was part of an interagency humanitarian mission led by the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs that had been notified to the parties well in advance. The United Nations is working to establish the full facts surrounding this incident. The Secretary General reiterates that international law, including international humanitarian law, must be respected at all times. Civilians and civilian objects, including humanitarian relief personnel and objects used for humanitarian relief operations, must be respected and protected at all times. Peacekeepers of the UN Interim Force in Lebanon continue to observe significant air and ground activity across the area of operations, including multiple Israeli airstrikes in both sectors east and west. Airstrikes were also reported north of the Litani River and in western Bekaa. Peacekeepers reported 377 firing incidents attributed to the Israel Defense Forces, and 15 trajectories of projectiles attributed to Lebanese non-state actors, including Hezbollah. Activity across UNIFIL's area of operations was characterized by sustained Israel Defense Forces operations, including high-density armored movements, large-scale engineering and demolition works, logistical traffic, and persistent artillery, mortar, and rocket fire. Yesterday, 3 mortar shells fired by the Israel Defense Forces impacted approximately 70 meters southwest of a UNIFIL position near Rumesh in Sector West. Earlier this morning, UNIFIL peacekeepers reported 1 impact inside and another near a UN position in Al-Bayada in Sector West, resulting in material damage to buildings within the position. We reiterate our call on all to uphold the inviolability of United Nations premises and ensure the safety and security of UN personnel at all times. Yesterday, the movement of UNIFIL peacekeepers was obstructed twice by the Israel Defense Forces in Sector West. Southwest of Al-Bayada, a tank halted peacekeepers escorting the Lebanese Red Cross, pointing its main gun towards the convoy and instructed them to leave the area. The convoy was later able to proceed. Additionally, near Nakura, a tank briefly blocked a UNIFIL patrol. Such restrictions are inconsistent with the obligation to respect UNIFIL's freedom of movement in accordance with its mandate and relevant Security Council resolutions. We call on all actors to fully respect this obligation. Despite the volatile security environment, UNIFIL continues to support humanitarian deconfliction efforts in coordination with the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Yesterday, 3 humanitarian organizations conducted missions in the Tyre area. Today, the UN Humanitarian Coordinator and Resident Coordinator for Lebanon, Imran Rissa, made a statement on the rising civilian toll from Israeli airstrikes despite the ceasefire announced on April 17th. He said that the violence has also taken an unacceptable toll on those working to save lives, underscoring the continued risks faced by first responders and medical teams operating in extremely dangerous conditions. Attacks affecting ambulances and frontline responders continue to raise serious concerns for the safety of civilians and humanitarian personnel. Since the announcement of the ceasefire, 15 attacks on healthcare have been recorded, resulting in the deaths of 12 healthcare workers and the injuries of 21 others. He underscored that international humanitarian law is clear. Civilians, including humanitarian workers, medical teams, and first responders, must be protected at all times, and the vital infrastructure civilians rely on must be spared. All parties must facilitate rapid and unimpeded humanitarian passage to civilians in need. Displacement orders were also issued yesterday for 5 villages located in hard-to-reach areas in the Bekaa Governorate, as well as for 3 villages in the South Governorate, some of them for the first time since the escalation began. Additional displacement orders were issued today in Tyre district, reportedly forcing at least 2,800 Lebanese and 2,560 Palestinian refugees to flee. Despite insecurity and access constraints, humanitarian partners, in close coordination with the government of Lebanon, continue to scale up assistance. Since March 2nd, partners have distributed more than 9.5 million hot and cold meals to conflict-affected people, alongside more than 166,000 blankets and 127,000 mattresses to support displaced families across the country. We've told you in the past weeks about the deteriorating food security situation in Somalia. Today, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, UNICEF, and the World Food Program are warning that a rapidly intensifying hunger emergency is pushing 6 million people, almost a third of the population, into critical levels of food insecurity between April and June. This information is based on the latest Integrated Food Security Phase Classification Report. Somalia now includes one of the worst malnutrition crises in the world, impacting 1.9 million children, including 493,000 boys and girls who face severe malnutrition. This is also the first time since 2022 that Somalia is at risk of famine in Barkaba district in southwest state. You will recall that in 2022, famine was averted through massively scaled up and sustained humanitarian interventions in the aftermath of the longest drought on record. The current and worsening crisis is driven by multiple shocks, including severe drought, insecurity, extremely limited humanitarian assistance, and the ripple effect of conflict in the Middle East. Humanitarian assistance in the most at-risk areas is being scaled up, but this is happening within severely constrained resources. Coverage remains limited nationwide, with nearly 90% of people receiving little or no support. FAO, OCHA, UNICEF, and WFP are calling for an urgent scale-up of life-saving assistance. The humanitarian coordinator in Somalia, George Conway, also said earlier today that there's a narrow but critical window of opportunity in the coming weeks to prevent famine through rapid and expanded humanitarian action, improved access to food, and sustained monitoring and response capacity in hotspot areas. Turning to Sudan, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Food Program, and UNICEF warned today that nearly 19.5 million people, that's 2 out of every 5 people in Sudan, are currently facing crisis levels of acute food insecurity, IPC Phase 3 or above, across Sudan, according to the latest Integrated Food Security Phase Classification analysis. 14 areas at risk of famine across Greater Darfur 14 areas are at risk of famine across Greater Darfur and Greater Kordofan. Conditions are expected to deteriorate further during the lean season between June and September. Meanwhile, humanitarian assistance remains critically inadequate compared to the scale of needs. Between February and May, humanitarian partners aim to reach 4.8 million people per month. However, only an estimated 3.13 million people received assistance in February. FAO, WFP, and UNICEF called for an immediate cessation of hostilities. The agencies also urged the international community to urgently scale up funding for food, emergency food production, nutrition, health, and water and sanitation services, as well as support for actions to rebuild livelihoods. Turning to South Sudan, where peacekeepers serving with the UN mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, are providing a protective presence for humanitarian partners and displaced communities returning to Okobo in Jonglei State. The return follows an outbreak of conflict in early March that caused widespread devastation and displacement. Through intensive engagement by UNMISS and partners, a fragile calm has taken hold, enabling the mission to facilitate the urgent delivery of much-needed humanitarian assistance. With the rainy season fast approaching, and with many roads soon expected to become impassable, UNMISS is also supporting the pre-positioning of critical supplies, so aid can continue reaching vulnerable communities in the months ahead. Today is the International Day of Families. This year's theme, Families, Inequalities, and Child Well-Being, underscores the need for stronger investment in integrated, family-oriented policies to reduce disparities and support healthy child development. Tomorrow is the International Day of Living Together in Peace, a reminder that fostering dialogue, solidarity, and mutual understanding is both an urgent necessity and a shared responsibility. Tomorrow is also the International Day of Light, celebrated on the anniversary of the first successful laser operation in 1960 by physicist and engineer Theodore Maiman. And Sunday is World Telecommunications and Information Safety Society Day. In a message, the Secretary General calls for greater investment in connectivity, from seabed cables to satellites, from local access to open standards and digital skills. Sunday is also the International Day against homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia. The Secretary General says that on this day, we affirm a simple truth: being who you are should never be a crime. That's it for me. Any questions before we turn to our guests? Yes, Edie and then Abdul Hamid.
A couple of follow-ups, Farhan. First, on Yemen, you implied, but I'm not sure that what the status is of the staff from the UN civil society and diplomatic missions who are held in Yemen. Were any of them part of this release?
No. In fact, this does not involve any of them. We appreciate this release, which is a very large and substantial one. But again, what we remind people of is, of course, the need to release all of those who have been held, all UN personnel, all international personnel, all non-governmental personnel, and again, remind people that that the immunities applying to the UN apply to all of our people, including, of course, our national staff as well.
Second follow-up on Somalia. Can you tell us what the UN appeal is and what percentage is funded?
Let me just. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, the information I have on this on the analysis report is that it involves heightened levels of food insecurity for nearly 1.9 million people. It does not. I don't have on me the latest figures on how much of the Somalia appeal is funded. We'll try to get back to you on that.
Okay, and third. You announced the new Undersecretary General for Safety and Security I'm sure many of us would be interested in having Undersecretary General Michaud do a briefing here before he leaves his post.
Okay.
He's someone who has not been very present in this room.
Certainly, we have received a great cooperation from him and his office. So we hear from him a bit, but we'll also try to make him available to you before he goes. Abdulhamid?
Thank you, Farhan. Can you update us on the prisoners exchange in Yemen, where this deal stands as we speak? Has been implemented or it's being implemented?
The agreement was made basically after a considerable amount of negotiating in Amman. The deal was approved yesterday. Hans Grunberg came out with his announcement of that. It is the International Committee of the Red Cross that will be the largest body actually implementing this transfer of the various prisoners, and we encourage support for them. That has not yet begun.
A very brief question on the 8th Congress of Fatah held in Ramallah. Was the UN represented there? Anyone attended the conference?
I don't believe that we were personally present, but we've been in contact with the Palestine Authority and have been kept apprised of all the various developments.
Okay. And another question. In your statement, you always say must. Settlements are illegal, it must be stopped. The word must keep repeated in your statement all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that must should go to Israel, right? Can the SG see the Israel for what it is? A defiant, rogue, law-breaking state that does not follow what every other state in the world follows when it comes to international law?
As far as that goes, we're no stranger to the fact that many member states, not just Israel, do not always heed our calls. Over time, you'll have seen that even those states that choose to ignore our calls are made to respect international law. There's a reason why international law exists, and we will continue to remind countries of their obligations. And over time, it is clear that, as with most member states, all of those states who are being called upon will have to respect their legal commitments. You had a question?
Yes, just a quick clarification. Hold on one second. I lost it somewhere. But on displacement in Gaza, is this due to Palestinian militia or IDF, or do we not know?
What the information we have is, as I mentioned just now, that on the one hand, we were told that Palestinian militia forces went to people's shelters and ordered them out, and that some of the families who had been displaced told us that they'd received phone calls from people who had identified themselves as Israeli forces. Yes, Islam.
Thank you, Farhan. Just to clarify, you give an example about how restrictive access was from the Egyptian border to Gaza, and you said half of the 8 trucks from Egypt could offload. Any number of trucks, like how many trucks you are talking about?
I don't have the overall numbers, but our logistics cluster has regular data on its website, so you can look to the website to see daily what's happening there. But in the first 11 days of this month, basically 1 in every 2 8 trucks were able to offload from Egypt. What we the information we have on that is that's due to both the limited number of crossings, the operation times, the Israeli requirement to offload and reload all truckloads, and so that all of those factors have limited the volume of supplies going in. Yes, Pan.
Thank you, Farhan. The third round peace talks between Israel and Lebanon kicked off in Washington, D.C. yesterday. I wonder if there were any UN officials present at the meeting.
No, these are not our talks, but we are keeping in touch with what the results of those talks are. Thanks. And with that, let's go to the screens where I believe we will be able to see our two guests. Edem Wosornu, there they are. Edem Wosornu, who is the director of OCHA's Crisis Response Division. And seated next to her, you'll see Altaf Musani, director of Emergency Health Interventions at WHO. Welcome. It's good to hear from you. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Farhan. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so greetings. We are actually not in Havana. We are in Panama and coming back from an intense 3-day visit to Cuba with Altaf Musani, Farhan, as you said, the Global Director for World Health Organization. We worked together with the Emergency Regional Director, Ciro Ugarte, also from the PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization. We spent 3-4 days in Havana and other locations in the country. Let me start by first thanking the UN Resident Coordinator, Francisco Pichon, the UN agencies, funds and programs, the UN agency setup, and the NGOs on the ground for the work they're doing in support of the government in the country. Cuba faces an increasingly complex situation with the humanitarian impact, and that is why we were there, well beyond the traditional natural disaster response, which again we are familiar with. We've heard us talk about Hurricane Melissa, Hurricane Rafael, Oscar, etc. But this cumulative impact of climate shocks, hurricane drought, economic contraction, and prolonged energy shortages due to measures placed on the country is turning in slow burner mode. What were once short-term needs into a sustained, multifaceted emergency, undermining essential services. In Cuba, I was inspired by the resilience of the people. I always say this to you, press corps, that it's the people who are determined to survive no matter what. And I saw it in Central African Republic, as I told you last week, and I also saw it in Havana, at Temisma, and other locations. They have had challenges before, but what I was struck by, the current mountain struggle they face to meet access to basic services, right? This is a struggle sharply accelerated by external pressures. The action plan, the UN action plan, highlights some of these issues. The energy crisis has become an undeniable multiplier of needs: access to water, access to food, essential services, including health, and my colleague Altaf will go into those details, is being disrupted. We saw this firsthand. Nowhere is a strain more visible than on the health system. The acute fuel shortages is affecting and restricting the delivery of humanitarian assistance, where at the same time as needs are rapidly rising. Predictable, efficient, and principled access of humanitarian aid is urgent. That is our priority. In engagement with the authorities at the highest levels, at all levels, across ministries, I stressed the need to ensure that our aid operation upholds the principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence. This is absolutely critical. We also need logistic support, expedited port clearance, increased internal transport capacity, more data, continuous power supply. To be able to run our operations, to be able to do basic monitoring, you need to move across the country. This is what we do everywhere we go, and this is how the humanitarian response is monitored and tracked. Only then will we be able to sustain critical services and to prevent further deterioration in the humanitarian situation. Of course, you know the hurricane season is upon us, starts in June. Last year, OCHA supported what we've talked about. Under Secretary General Tom Fletcher has talked about it, anticipatory action here. He issued $7.5 million so far for Cuba. For Hurricane Melissa alone, ahead of time, he signed $4 million. What does that do? It helps us to pre-position supplies ahead of the crisis, and this was significant in Cuba. The government has acknowledged this approach helped save lives and will continue to advocate for more funding to be able to do so. We need to strengthen preparedness and secure resources, or Cuba will enter this season with severely diminished response capacity. Again, you remember I mentioned before, Hurricane Melissa, before that Rafael, before that Oscar, and everything else in between. The UN's revised plan of action issued in March, initially launched last year to respond to the devastation of Melissa, now adjusted to respond to the impact of the energy crisis. $94 million is what we're asking for 2 million people, or basically 1 in every 5 Cubans. So far, we have less than 30% of the funds received, 30 million, of which a lot of that is also from the Central Emergency Response Funds. Dear media, members of the media, I want to share, as always, what I heard from the Cuban people. We were at a maternity clinic in Artemisa. It's about central west of the country. We were able to move a bit in a consolidated transport situation because of the fuel crisis. I was with the resident coordinator and my mission counterparts with other members of the humanitarian community. Alina was there with her in a maternity clinic, there with her daughter, 37 weeks pregnant. She described how staff have to carry water up the stairs to the rooms on the second floor, given that the water pumps don't work. I always like to engage the community to get a sense of what it is that they're asking for, what it is that they need. I also met Damisela, whose pregnant granddaughter gets to eat only rice and beans instead of the nutritious diet she needs to sustain this pregnancy. Why? Because no transport for vegetables, fruit, meat. And Miriam told me her daughter cannot access simple medicine to treat her anemia. These women ask for the same things always: electricity, food, medicine, water, and an end to the crisis to enable them to live their lives, to have their daughters deliver safely. Members of the press corps, simple message from my side: without enough fuel and more funding, the most vulnerable people, the children, older people, pregnant women will suffer the most. My call is simple: life-saving aid must reach people quickly and without delays. I want to emphasize that. The longer it takes, the weaker and the stronger the vulnerability gets, including fuel for hospitals, essential services, and again, Altaf will get into the health details. Acting fast and working together is the only way to stop the situation from getting worse. We can't afford another humanitarian crisis. We already have a stretched humanitarian situation on the ground across all sectors, from getting worse, and to protect those most in need in the months ahead. Brian, I'll stop here and hand over to Altaf. Thank you.
Thank you, Edem. I'll further dive into the health situation. The Cuban health system remains operational, but it is under severe and sustained pressure. Shortages, as outlined by my colleague, of fuel, electricity, medicines, medical supplies are critically disrupting a hospital's ability to function. This includes emergency care, blood banks, laboratory, immunization programs, maternal and child, as well as surgical services. The human cost, as outlined, is already significant and continues to grow. More than 100,000 patients, including over 11,000 children, are waiting for surgeries that have been delayed due to power outages or supply shortages. Around 5 million people are living with chronic conditions and are currently at risk of interrupting life-sustaining treatments, including 16,000 patients requiring radiotherapy and more than 12,000 patients currently undergoing chemotherapy. Maternal and child health services are particularly affected. More than 32,000 pregnant women faced increased risks due to reduced access to diagnostic services, as well as limited transport for obstetric emergencies. Neonatal care is highly vulnerable, as life-saving equipment depends on stable power supply, which is not currently sustained. Routine immunization coverage remains high, but is increasingly under pressure to the stability of the cold chain, limitations in transport, and supply disruptions. The epidemiological situation is also evolving. There are increased risks of vector-borne diseases such as dengue and chikungunya, as well as waterborne and foodborne diseases driven by disruptions to power, sanitation, and hygiene systems. We saw these challenges and the first-hand impact during our mission, particularly at the pediatric hospitals, as mentioned by my colleague, which serves 8 municipalities in the province. Inspiring young doctors, nurses were caring for children under difficult conditions. Children and medical staff often struggle to reach care due to fuel and transport constraints. Local clinics lack the basic supplies, diagnostic equipment, and reagents, which are forcing patients to seek hospital care. Blackouts in a number of areas are now lasting up to 20 hours, as a result, shutting down most hospital wards except intensive care units and emergency services. Power outages are forcing health facilities to reduce vital services, prioritize urgent care, limit diagnostic and surgical operations. Fuel shortages are also limiting ambulatory services, referral capacity, and further restricting access to care. The impact extends well beyond health facilities. Disruption to electricity and fuel supplies are affecting safe water, food production, disruption to the cold chain, which all require fuel to function. Despite this, as mentioned by my colleague, healthcare workers continue to demonstrate resilience and commitment. This was most evident amongst the workforce that we visited in the hospital, where healthcare workers, who are also parents, are having to make impossible choices. Our priority is clear: sustain life and essential health services, protect the vulnerable populations, ensure access to energy, and ensure the provision of medicines and medical equipment. Thank you.
Over to the press for questions. Yes, Edie.
Thank you very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. First, your visit to Havana coincided with the visit of the head of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, John Ratcliffe, who met with Raul Castro's grandson. Did you have any contact with either of them or know anything about that visit? And secondly, if the failure to allow oil and gas deliveries continues into June and July, what are the implications for Cuba's humanitarian situation and health situation? Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Edith, and good to see you from the screen. Our visit did not coincide with the CIA director's visit. We flew out as they flew in, and our visit was, of course, purely humanitarian. We did get to engage with the members of the diplomatic community, about 24 ambassadors, including the charge d'affaires of the US, and we did get into the details on response capacity, all member states assuring that the humanitarian situation and to facilitate humanitarian goods flow in the country was of top priority. The good news is there's clear data or at least assessments, or not assessments, but clear analyses is how we came up with our plan of action. I stressed the importance of the independence of humanitarian action. I engaged with the authorities on the need to do data analytics, needs assessments on the ground, and we have assurances there. The good news is we did engage, indeed, as I said, with the US, Mr. Ambassador Hammer, and discussed issues around the humanitarian needs on the ground. Altaf has more details on the fuel and health situation, what he said before.
Thanks, Edem. And so just to stress that the fuel having a direct impact on the public health risk, these are the vector-borne and waterborne diseases that are increased at risk. I mentioned dengue, malaria, and chikungunya. This is having a direct impact on both patients and providers, healthcare workers needing to access those facilities, limiting transport, our ability to call and identify those women that are at high risk in terms of pregnancy who need immediate attention, and then most importantly on the health system at large that need to shut down essential services. We've already illustrated at least 100,000 patients have had delayed surgeries, and of the 100,000, more than 11,000 are children. So this is already having an impact on health-seeking behavior as well as health outcomes.
A quick follow-up. Did you get any indication at all that fuel shipments might resume, or at least another big shipment from Russia, which did the only one that I recall recently?
Thank you, Edith. We keep pushing for fuel into the country, of course, from our purposes, if I may stress, for the humanitarian assistance delivery. Without our ability to move in country, we cannot even monitor our assistance. We're trying to do that within the limitations. This is the first, it's good. We were able to pull resources and hire a big minivan to put all of us and our teams into the van to travel across the country to be able to see firsthand the communities who are affected. But of course, this is not sustainable, and we need to ensure that when the fuel comes in, we can also use some of that for the humanitarian purposes. There are ongoing discussions with different member states to be able to get this done. And from our end, we are also, from the UN side, there are ongoing conversations and discussions to ensure that fuel comes in definitely for the purposes of humanitarian aid delivery in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the briefing. I'm Evelyn Leopold from the Dag Hammarskjöld Fund for Journalists. I'm going to ask the obvious. There is an embargo that is imposed on Cuba by the United States year after year after year. And is what you're doing there considered a violation of that embargo?
Ms. Leopold, thanks a lot. We are in touch with the member states, including, as I said, with the US, in New York, in different parts. Our Undersecretary General is engaged at the highest levels. It is clear that humanitarian goods and humanitarian assistance is not part of that. We have back and forth conversations in this regard. The reason we've been able to secure at least 30% funding for the plan of action, which is humanitarian, is because we are allowed to do humanitarian assistance in the country. So it's open, transparent conversations with all member states on this regard. And we have good assurances that we are able to continue the work that we do. That's what I can say. Thank you, Ms. Leopold.
Thank you for the briefing. My name is Abdul Hamid Sayan from the Arabic Daily, Al-Quds Al-Arabi. First, if you can share with us some of those countries contributing to the funds to help Cuba. Which countries, and in particular OAS countries, are they helping their brothers in Cuba? And my second question maybe has some political angle. But don't you see that 10 million Cubans are under embargo, and that is collective punishment, which is violation of international law? And in your briefing, you said these measures imposed on Cuba, but you avoided saying who is putting those measures in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdulhamiz. Again, you've heard me many times in these briefings ensuring the strict delineation of our humanitarian mandate. And that is why I went to Cuba. The UN has many, many hats. My hat is strictly humanitarian. Thank you so much for asking the question on which member states have funded the appeal. I'd like to stress the transparent nature of our documents. They're all online. The EU, Spain, Canada, Qatar, the Central Emergency Response Fund, our Fund for All, by all, a key instrument by UN Secretary General and the ERC, ensuring that assistance gets to people as quickly as possible. The $7.5 million from the SURF already given to Cuba is an example of how we focus on the needs of populations on the ground. And here, let me flip it and call on all donors and member states to assist. You talked about assistance also coming from the region. Indeed, I was able to engage we were able to engage with the Mexicans, the Brazilians in country as well, the diplomatic corps, and there are conversations. There is South-South cooperation, there is assistance coming through the different channels, but I really want to take this opportunity to highlight the fact that this UN plan of action, which has been discussed, is a transparent mechanism to be able to look at what is going in through what we need from the health side, water, sanitation, food, security, the energy, fuel, everything that we need is in that plan. It's not a lot, $94 million for 2 million people. The good news, we've gotten some. The bad news is a $60 million gap. So here, let me take this platform to call on funding for this appeal as soon as possible, and to reinforce the fact that the June hurricane season is upon us, and the vulnerabilities will continue to get worse if assistance is not delivered now. Thank you.
Can I have follow-up? I just have a short follow-up. Venezuela used to supply Cuba with lots of its fuel. Now, do you confirm that that stopped completely? And who was responsible for ordering Venezuela to end its fuel supplies to Cuba? Can you share any information with us about that?
Abdul, thank you. Look, I will be very honest. Our response efforts are focused on people and need. I will not get into discussions on things that are already available in the media. Our conversations with the members of the diplomatic corps, the government at the highest levels, across ministries, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Trade, which is the UN's counterpart, our conversations with the NGOs, our conversations with local partners who are on the ground delivering and supporting, was about how do we ensure the advocacy, including using this platform to highlight the needs on the ground. The politics, I dare say, as humanitarians, is important to align where we stress impartiality, independence, humanity, and neutrality of humanitarian action. The balance is important. The politics we leave out, we leave it to others. The important thing is, as I said before, fuel, conversations around fuel and getting fuel into the country continues. You've seen the tweets back and forth. We are avoiding all of that. We're focusing on how best to engage and ensure that we get much needed fuel through the humanitarian channels to be able to deliver humanitarian assistance on the ground. Thank you.
Stefano, are you there?
Oh, sorry,
Okay.
I didn't hear you. Yes, well, in part, something was answered, but I tried to follow up anyway. It's about what was asked about the U.S. embargo. Well, This is for, for how journalists have to explain the situation in Cuba. There is one side that says it's all the faults of the United States, because if there was not the embargo, this situation will not be there. And then there is Ambassador Waltz, for example, a few days ago, I asked him the specific question, and he said it was all fake news because U.S. Doesn't do that kind of humanitarian embargo at all, and actually he suggested that he said that there were ships leaving from New Orleans and Florida with medicine for Cuba. Now, I don't want you to take a political side here, but I would like to explain exactly, if you can, who is responsible for what's happening now in Cuba. And you say, well, we don't want to get in politics, but I ask you because you are there in the field. If we know who is responsible and the public knows, maybe we can fix the problem better.
Thank you, sir. Didn't catch your name because the line was cut, but I caught your question. And the answer is going to be, I am asking, as a humanitarian crisis response director who went into the country, I'm asking from my side, from our perspective, the focus should be on the people. The focus should be on getting assistance to them through the plan, which is hyper-prioritized, the 94 million that we need across different sectors. My job is not to hold court on responsibilities and accountabilities. My job is to focus on highlighting the needs on the ground and the way we can get assistance in. I give you an example of what I'm talking about. The colleagues on the ground who are working tirelessly under the leadership of the resident coordinator are working with the response that they get, are working with the funding that they get. We can send through Farhan, the deputy spokesperson, where we stand right now. It's available also on financial tracking system, where we stand right now on the how much we've received and what we've been able to do. What I also do know is when you are on the ground and you're speaking to people and they're asking for what is in our plan, saying that they need assistance to food and water and shelter, water and health facilities, etc. It is our duty, myself and my colleague from WHO, to ensure that we are passing these messages as well. That's what I can say. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And Stefano, I'd also like to add the Secretary General has spoken out very recently about the situation in Cuba. You should look at what he said in his press encounter in Kenya earlier this week. It's on our website. Question from Edie?
Just a quick follow-up. Who was the highest-ranking Cuban officials that you met with?
Thank you, Edie. We met with the president of Cuba, the deputy vice minister of foreign affairs of Cuba, the deputy vice minister for trade, which is the UN's counterpart, and the minister of health.
Thanks. Thanks.
And also the general for civil defense, which of course, Farhan, which is of course our counterpart when it comes to international search and rescue advisory group, the United Nations Disaster Assessment Coordination Team. I met the general and his full complement of civil defense as well. Thanks a lot.
Okay. I don't see any further questions, so I will free my guests up. Thanks again to Edem Wosornu and Altaf Musani for their presentations. As they said, they're speaking to you from Panama following their visit to Cuba. Thanks very much, and best of luck on your work. Thanks. Bye. Have a good afternoon, everyone.